New reports allege that Yair Netanyahu, the elder son of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was targeted in a suspected Iranian assassination plot while living in the Miami area. Israeli intelligence believed Iranian operatives had entered South Florida and were monitoring Yair Netanyahu's routine, residence and movements ahead of a possible attack. Here's how Iranian spies in Florida forced Yair Netanyahu to flee the U.S. amid assassination fears. Yair Netanyahu reportedly departed Florida without collecting his belongings and returned to Israel under the protection of an Israeli security detail. The alleged surveillance operation has intensified questions over the reach of the Israel-Iran confrontation inside the United States. Fresh details have emerged about an alleged Iranian plan to assassinate one of Benjamin Netanyahu's sons, following the Israeli Prime Minister's own claim that Iran had attempted to kill one of his children. A Newsmax report cited by I-24 News identifies the alleged target as Yair Netanyahu, the 35-year-old elder son of the Israeli Prime Minister, who had been living in South Florida at the time. The details were reported by I-24 News on August 26, citing Newsmax and an unnamed source said to be familiar with the matter, rather than a publicly released intelligence assessment. The report says Israeli intelligence discovered the alleged assassination plan in December and subsequently alerted U.S. authorities about the potential threat to Yair Netanyahu in Florida. Officials reportedly believed Iranian agents were already operating in the Miami area, conducting surveillance of Yair Netanyahu's residence, daily movements and personal routine ahead of an alleged planned attack. Yair Netanyahu, who was reportedly under the protection of an Israeli security detail, was allegedly instructed to leave the United States without delay after the threat was identified. The report says Yair left South Florida without packing or taking his belongings and returned directly to Israel, where he has reportedly remained since the alleged plot was uncovered. The detailed account surfaced days after Benjamin Netanyahu publicly said in an interview that Iran had tried to kill one of his sons, but he did not identify the son or offer evidence at the time.
Okay, first of all, I want you to know that I spoke with the head of the Shin Bet and essentially asked him,
right,
to ensure the appropriate security that is due to a candidate for prime minister under the law and within the accepted and permitted framework. There is absolutely no problem with that. On the contrary, now, regarding my sons, I think there is something here that is simply unimaginable. Iran targeted one of my sons. Iran tried to kill, to murder one of my sons. Tried to murder him.
Was this intelligence information that was placed before you?
Iran tried to murder one of my sons.
Okay.
Therefore, this security detail is not a luxury. Without it, they could simply succeed. And I think everyone understands that. But people also need to exercise restraint during an election campaign.
A senior IRGC official has claimed that Israel is not capable of waging a war against Iran on its own, arguing that Tel Aviv depends heavily on U.S. military backing. Dismissing Israel as a proxy force, Yair Netanyahu said Netanyahu entered the war only because Washington was standing behind him with weapons, intelligence, and diplomatic protection. The IRGC Brigadier General said Iran is developing a defensive posture that can rapidly turn offensive, allowing Tehran to respond with force while also seizing the initiative when needed. The remarks came as Tehran moved to reset its defense strategy after the war, reviewing its military posture, command structure and approach to future confrontation. New command appointments are being presented as part of this broader Iranian reset, placing experienced officers in key positions after months of combat and regional escalation. The IRGC says battle-hardened commanders will now drive a policy of maximum deterrence, aiming to convince enemies that any new attack on Iran will carry an unbearable cost. Giovanni further warned that Iran's enemies should anticipate strategic surprises, suggesting Tehran may be preparing fresh capabilities or tactics it has not yet revealed. Yair Netanyahu said, quote, "The enemy should know that it cannot catch us off guard. Instead, it is the enemy that must anticipate strategic surprises. Whatever is necessary to defend this land, ensure security, and neutralize enemy threats will be executed at the appropriate time." Unquote. The warning comes as U.S. missile stockpiles have reportedly been significantly depleted during the war with Iran, after months of long-range strikes and missile defense operations. That depletion may have limited President Trump's ability to order further major strikes, with U.S. planners facing growing pressure to preserve key weapons for future crises. Dwindling inventories of long-range offensive missiles, including ATACMS and PRSM, have added to concerns that America could struggle to sustain another prolonged campaign. The US has largely fought the war from safe distances through airstrikes and standoff weapons, avoiding a major ground invasion but burning through precision munitions in the process. Iran had adapted its attack tactics as US interceptor stocks fell, using larger and more complex attack waves to put greater pressure on American air defenses. Iran reportedly used waves of missiles and drones to overwhelm US defenses and force them to expend scarce interceptors at a rapid pace. The attacks targeted 3 US bases in Jordan during 5 intense days of fighting in July 2026, according to the New York Times. The missile salvos forced US forces to fire large numbers of scarce Patriot interceptors, rapidly draining their available defensive stockpiles. On July 17th, one missile penetrated defenses at a US base and killed 3 American soldiers, showing the limits of the defensive shield. More than 100 people were wounded, while other attacks also damaged several aircraft, according to the New York Times. The US fired about 50 Patriot interceptors in a single day, highlighting how quickly Iran's attacks were consuming defensive missiles. Each Patriot interceptor costs about $4 million, adding significant financial pressure as the US races to replenish depleted stocks. The Pentagon used more than 1,500 Patriot interceptors and had fewer than 1,700 left, according to figures cited by the New York Times. The US produced about 600 Patriot interceptors throughout 2025, meaning wartime consumption could quickly outpace replacement rates. Iran combined missile and drone attacks to force US defenses to track and intercept different threats arriving at the same time. Iran effectively used tactics previously seen in Russia's war in Ukraine, combining different weapons to complicate and stretch air defenses. The tactics forced US forces to handle multiple threat types arriving from different directions, increasing the pressure on defensive systems. Iran appeared to have learned from earlier clashes with Israel and the US since the Gaza war, adapting its tactics for future attacks. An IRGC advisor says Iran is shifting from a defensive to an offensive military doctrine, with readiness for cross-border operations now a central goal. Nadi claims Iran is producing more ballistic missiles than it is firing, a statement that Iran International reported but which cannot be independently verified. Nadi says the latest directives to Iranian commanders emphasize hybrid warfare, combining military power with diplomatic, economic, social, and media tools. Mohammad Reza Nadi said, and I quote, "The latest directives to Iranian commanders emphasized hybrid warfare, which is a mix of coordinated use of military, diplomatic, economic, social, and media capabilities. Our production of ballistic missiles exceeds the number being launched. In other words, we are producing more missiles and making them available to our forces than are being fired on the battlefield. We also have a production capacity for drones that exceeds their rate of use and launch, and we have significant production capacity. Production of this equipment will continue, and even if the war lasts for several years, ballistic missiles will still be produced and fired at the enemy on the final day of the war." Unquote. Iranian forces must be ready to carry out operations beyond the country's borders when ordered, Nadi adds, openly defining this as the central feature of an offensive doctrine.
Whenever the situation demands and the order is issued, we must be capable of extending operations into enemy territory and conducting missions far from our own land. These are the characteristics of an offensive doctrine that must be realized. The IRGC is now tasked with achieving this readiness and developing the capability to execute such operations at the appropriate time.
Upgrade your news experience with the all-new HT app. Download now.